The Lord hath smitten him by the hand of a woman. Book of Judith 16:7. I was in delightful company. The lady who sat facing me across the massive Renaissance fireplace was none other than Venus. She was no demi-mondaine who had taken a pseudonym to wage war upon the masculine sex, but the goddess of love in person. She had lit a crackling fire and was settled in a comfortable armchair. The firelight flickered over her pale face, her white eyes, and from time to time her feet when she sought to warm them. Her head was magnificent in spite of the stony, lifeless eyes, but this was the only part of her that I was able to see, for the sublime creature had wrapped her marble body in a great fur, beneath which she was huddled like a shivering cat. "I do not understand, madame," I ventured. "It is no longer cold. In fact, the past 2 weeks have been delightfully spring-like. It must be your nerves." "You may keep your spring," she replied in a toneless voice, and then sneezed divinely twice over. "I cannot stand it here, and I'm beginning to see why." "What, my dear?" "I am beginning to believe the incredible and understand the incomprehensible, namely the philosophy of the German people and the qualities of their womenfolk. It no longer surprises me in the least that you Northerners are unable to love, for you have not an inkling what love is about." "I beg your pardon, madame," I replied, my blood rising. "I have really given you no reason to speak in this way." "No, it is true, you have not." The divine one sneezed for a third time and shrugged her shoulders with inimitable grace. "That is why I have always been kind to you, and have even paid you a visit now and then, although I invariably catch cold in spite of my furs. Do you remember the first time we met?" "How could I forget it?" I said. "You had thick brown curls then, brown eyes and rosy lips, but I recognized you at once by the outline of your face and its marble pallor. You always wore a jacket trimmed with squirrel." "Yes, you were truly in love with that jacket. And what an attentive suitor." "You taught me the meaning of love. Worshipping you made me forget 2,000 years of history." "How incomparably faithful I was." "Oh, as for faithfulness, you ungrateful man." "I do not wish to reproach you. You are undoubtedly a divine woman, but above all you are a woman and, like every member of your sex, cruel in matters of love." "What you call cruelty," the goddess of love retorted, "is the very substance of sensual and natural love. It is woman's true nature to give herself wherever she loves and to love whatever pleases her." "But can there be greater cruelty for a lover than a beloved's infidelity?" "Alas," she replied, "woman is faithful as long as she loves, but you demand that she be faithful without love and give herself without enjoyment. Who is cruel then, woman or man? You Northerners take love too seriously. You speak of duty where it is purely a question of pleasure." "Yes, madame, as far as love is concerned, our feelings are honorable and virtuous, and our relations are durable." "And yet," interrupted the lady, "you nurse a secret craving for a life of sheer paganism. You modern men, you children of reason, cannot begin to appreciate love as pure bliss and divine serenity. Indeed, this kind of love is disastrous for men like you, for as soon as you try to be natural, you become vulgar. To you, nature is an enemy. You have made devils of the smiling gods of Greece, and you have turned me into a creature of evil. You may cast anathemas on me, curse me, or offer yourself in sacrifice like frenzied Bacchantes at my altar, but if one of you so much as dares to kiss my crimson lips, he must make a barefoot pilgrimage to Rome in sackcloth and ashes, and pray until the cursed staff grows green again, while all around me roses, violets, and myrtle bloom everlastingly. Their fragrance is not for you. Stay in your northern mists and Christian incense, and leave our pagan world to rest under the lava and the rubble. Do not dig us up. Pompeii was not built for you, nor were our villas, our baths, and our temples. You do not need the gods. They would freeze to death in your climate." The lovely marble creature coughed and rearranged the sable around her shoulders. "Thank you for the lesson in classics," I replied, "but I cannot deny that in your peaceful and sunny world, just as in our misty climate, man and woman are natural enemies. Love may unite them briefly to form one mind, one heart, one will, but all too soon they are torn asunder. And this you know better than I. Either one of them must bend the other to his will, or else he must let himself be trampled underfoot." "Under the woman's foot, of course," said Lady Venus impertinently, "and that you know better than I." Of course, that is why I have no illusions. In other words, you are now my slave without illusions, and I shall trample you mercilessly. Madame, you do not know me yet. I admit that I am cruel, since the word gives you so much delight, but am I not entitled to be so? It is man who desires, woman who is desired. This is woman's only advantage, but it is a decisive one. By making man so vulnerable to passion, nature has placed him at woman's mercy, and she who has not the sense to treat him like a humble subject, a slave, a plaything, and finally to betray him with a laugh, well, she is a woman of little wisdom. My dear, your principles, I protested, are founded on the experience of 1,000 years, she replied mischievously, running her white fingers through the dark fur. The more submissive woman is, the more readily man recovers his self-possession and becomes domineering. But the more cruel and faithless she is, the more she ill-treats him, the more wantonly she toys with him, and the harsher she is, the more she quickens his desire and secures his love and admiration. It has always been so, from the time of Helen and Delilah all the way to Catherine the Great and Lola Montez. I cannot deny it, I said. Nothing could be more attractive to man than the idea of a beautiful tyrant, both voluptuous and cruel, who insolently and inconsistently changes her favorite to suit her humor. And wears furs, said the goddess. What made you think of that? I know your tastes. Are you aware, I said, that you have become quite a coquette since we last met? What do you mean by that? I mean that I can think of nothing more extravagantly flattering to your white skin than these dark furs. The goddess laughed. You are dreaming, she cried. Wake up. She grasped my arm with her marble hand. Wake up, she repeated, this time in a low, gruff voice. I strained to open my eyes. I could see the hand that was shaking me, but suddenly it turned a tawny brown, and the voice became the husky alcoholic voice of my Cossack, who stood towering above me. Do get up, said the good fellow. This is disgraceful. What is disgraceful? To fall asleep with your clothes on and a book in your hand. He snuffed the candles which had burned right down and picked up the volume that had fallen from my hand. He looked at the title page. Aha, Hegel. Besides, it is time we left for Mr. Severin's. He is expecting us for tea. A very curious dream, said Severin, when I had finished my tale. He sat with his elbows on his knees, his chin resting in his delicately veined hands, lost in deep thought. As I expected, he remained for a long while without moving, almost without breathing. I found nothing remarkable in his behavior, for over the last 3 years we had become very good friends, and I was used to his eccentricities. He was undoubtedly an odd character, although he was not the dangerous madman that his neighbors and indeed the whole district of Cologne considered him to be. Not only did I find him interesting, but I had a great liking for him, and consequently, I too was regarded by many people as a trifle mad. For a Galician gentleman and a landowner, especially considering his age, he was barely 30, he was surprisingly lucid and serious, almost to the point of pedantry. He followed a rigorous philosophical and practical system. Each minute of his life obeyed the dictates of the thermometer, the barometer, the aerometer, the hydrometer, Hippocrates, Hufeland, Plato, Nig, and Lord Chesterfield. Occasionally, however, he was subject to attacks of such violence that he seemed about to burst through the very walls. At such times people would wisely avoid him. While he sat there in silence, one could hear the faint singing of the fire, the humming of the venerable samovar, the creak of the old rocking chair on which I sat smoking my cigar, and the chirrup of the cricket in the wall. I let my gaze wander over the curious collection of objects, skeletons of animals, stuffed birds, globes, plaster casts. Suddenly my eyes alighted on a picture that I had often seen before, but which today in the red glow of the fire made a particularly strange impression on me. It was a large oil painting done in the powerful colors of the Flemish school, and its subject was quite unusual. A beautiful woman, naked beneath her dark furs, was resting on an ottoman, supported on her left arm. A playful smile hovered on her lips, and her thick hair was tied in a Grecian knot and dusted with snow-white powder. Her right hand played with a whip, while her bare foot rested nonchalantly on a man who lay on the ground before her like a slave, like a dog. The pronounced but well-shaped features of the man showed quite melancholy and helpless passion. He gazed up at her with the fanatical, burning eyes of a martyr. This man, this footstool for her feet, was Severin, beardless and 10 years younger by the look of him. "Venus in furs," I cried, pointing at the picture. "That is how I saw her in my dreams." "I too," said Severin, "but I was dreaming with my eyes open." "What do you mean?" "Oh, it is a ridiculous story." "It appears that my dream was prompted by your picture," I pursued. "Do tell me what is behind it, and how it came to play such an important part in your life. I cannot wait to hear." "Then look at the picture facing it," said my friend, without answering my question. It was a remarkably good copy of Titian's famous Venus with the Mirror, which hangs in the Dresden Art Gallery. "Yes, but what of it?" Severin rose and pointed to the furs in which Titian had draped his goddess. "She is also a Venus in furs," he said, smiling subtly. I do not think the venerable Venetian had any ulterior motive. He simply painted the portrait of some distinguished Messalina coldly inspecting her majestic charms, and he was tactful enough to paint a Cupid holding the mirror, with some reluctance, I may add. The picture is merely a piece of flattery. Later, some connoisseur of the Baroque dubbed the Lady Venus, and the Despot's furs in which Titian's model wrapped herself, more out of fear of catching cold than from modesty, became the symbol of the tyranny and cruelty that are common to beautiful women. But what does it matter? As it stands, the painting is a biting satire on modern love. Venus must hide herself in a vast fur, lest she catch cold in our abstract northern climate, in the icy realm of Christianity. Severin laughed and lit another cigarette. Just then the door opened, and a pretty, plump blonde with an amiable and intelligent air, wearing a black silk dress, trotted in with a tray of cold meat and eggs for our tea. Severin picked up an egg and opened it with his knife. "Did I not tell you that I wanted them soft-boiled?" he shouted, with a violence that made the young woman quake with fear. "But my dear Sucha," she began fearfully. "What do you mean, Schutza?" he shouted. "You are to obey. Do you hear?" Whereupon he tore down a note that was hanging beside his weapons. The pretty woman fled from the room like a frightened doe. "Let me catch you doing that again," he shouted after her. "But Severin," I said, placing my hand on his arm, "how can you treat a lovely little woman like that?" "Take a look at her," he said, with a sly wink. "If I had flattered her, she would have tied a noose around my neck, but because I train her with a knout, she worships me." "What nonsense!" "Nonsense yourself. That is the way to train women. You may live like a pasha in your harem if you choose, but do not foist your theories on me." "Why not?" he exclaimed. "Goethe's words, 'Be the anvil or be the hammer,' are never more true than when applied to the relations between man and woman. Incidentally, the Lady Venus informed you of this in your dream. Woman's power lies in the passion she can arouse in man, in which she will exploit to her own advantage, unless he remains always on his guard. Man has only one choice, to be a slave or to be a tyrant. If he surrenders to her, the yoke will begin to weigh on his neck, and soon he will feel the touch of the whip." "What odd maxims!" "Not maxims, but personal experience," he replied with a nod. "I have been thoroughly whipped myself, and it cured me. Would you like to read about it?" He rose and took from his massive desk a small manuscript which he laid in front of me. "You asked me what the picture was about, and I have long owed you an explanation. Here you are. Read this." Severin sat by the fire with his back toward me, lost in reverie. Everything became quiet. The fire singing in the hearth, the samovar, and the cricket were heard once more. I opened the manuscript and read, "Confessions of a Supersensualist." The margin of the manuscript bore, in the form of an epigraph, an adaptation of the famous lines from Faust. "Thou sensual, supersensual libertine, a little girl can lead thee by the nose." I turned the page and read, "Since I believe that it is impossible to describe the past objectively, I have compiled the following from the personal diary I kept during the period in question. Thus my story will have a flavor of the present.